And there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another fantastic installment from very high above all the puerile and pedantic forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Tuesday. Well, it was quite a weekend. I mean, plenty of news to go around. I mean, the stack of stuff just kept growing almost exponentially this morning. I've got a lot to talk about this morning, but some of the things that I want to visit about on the program are now, evidently, we have a ceasefire in the Middle East, and it was almost blown up this morning, pun intended, by Israel and Iran trying to bomb each other. So we're going to get to that first off. And then there's a piece out from the Tehran Times. Now, obviously, in Tehran, there is no freedom of the press, and there probably is no independent journalism over there. But anyway, they have a news outlet called the Tehran Times, and their moniker of it is Straight Truth. I'm not even kidding you. Anyway, we're going to talk about that, and then a report out that, and I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but evidently, there is rampant fraud in all forms of work from home, both at the federal government and anywhere else. Who would have saw that coming? And then, of course, there was more I don't even know what you call it, craziness happening from the New York City mayor's race. You have an avowed and openly admitted socialist that, I don't know. I mean, he's been doing a lot of media appearances. I haven't really seen any polls to suggest that he was ahead or he's going to win, but he's sure getting a lot of attention. And now he says that exams in schools are racist. Well, of course they are. I mean, anything that you don't like is now automatically racist. And then somewhere along the line, we're going to talk about this whole so-called federal public land grab, which I don't really see how you could have a land grab if you already own the land. But anyway, we're going to talk about that. I know you're going to find this really hard to believe, but the Wyoming Democrats and many, many, many Republicans are just flat lying to you. Or they just haven't read the bill and they don't have any idea what they're talking about. And you know what? Let's start there for a minute. It's pretty rare that a story that I do on the podcast, cracks the record books. And this one didn't really come all that close, but it did get a lot of attention. And I did 2 episodes about this provision in the big, beautiful bill. And the first one was an interview with Representative Hageman, where she just says, look, a lot of what you're hearing is not in the bill. A lot of what you're hearing is just plain not true. It's either overreactions, or it's people just flat not knowing what they're talking about, or there's groups like the Outdoor Alliance or the Wilderness Society that are just flat misleading you, that are just not telling you the truth. And so I did that one. And then I did a follow-up episode called Who Made the Map? And this is really important because there was, for a while, a map floating around social media. and it appeared to show vast swaths of federal land that would be up for sale if this provision in the big beautiful bill passes. And it was a lot of public land. Well, it turns out that map is not representative at all of what's being proposed in this bill. In fact, it's not even close. And that map was originally created as to depict the part of the Rock Springs RMP plan. So it had nothing to do with this. It was just put out by the Wilderness Society and the Outdoor Alliance. And the reason I did the episode on it is I looked into how this map was created. You see, in a previous life, I used to be a GIS specialist for a pipeline company. I was the guy that went out and made the maps. And one of my biggest jobs, and this is actually kind of fascinating. Now it's all old news, but back in 2006, 2007, I used ArcGIS to make an interactive map with this gas company's gas field. And one of the reasons for it is they had no idea where all their pipelines were. So I used ArcGIS to map all their pipelines and make the map interactive so that it would give you turn-by-turn directions from gas well to gas well. So I do know what I'm talking about this, and as it relates to that map that was put out by the Outdoor Alliance and the Wilderness Society, and I should probably tell you this too. So any of these maps that you see, that is a visual representation of a big, gigantic spreadsheet. Really, ArcGIS, all of these mapping programs are really a giant database is what it is. And the map is a visual representation of that data. Another example is, you see, on the news where they show you the map with all the weather and all of that? Well, that's the same program. But they input all that weather data in, and then they push play on this map program, and it shows you where all the weather patterns are going. Same thing here. You create a big giant spreadsheet and the way it would work is you'd take land surveys. Most of those are done by the USGS, and you map out all the federal land. And then each one of those little pieces is its own entry in the spreadsheet. So it'll give you the corner coordinates, however many corners there are, of what that land parcel looks like. And then it's represented on the map. So the data table that should be accompanied with that map doesn't tell you anything, which means they didn't use any data to make the map, and therefore none of it is accurate at all. And so, and they did that for a very good reason, because they're an absolutely biased leftist organization, and they wanted you to believe that all this federal land was just going to be sold on the auction block, and Yellowstone will be up, Grand Teton will definitely be up after that, and then we'll just sell it all. Well, none of that is true, and that was the point of, and actually, I guess if I could sum up that episode, the point was you're being lied to. You are not using accurate information, and if you're going to engage in this argument, at least know what you're talking about. And that was the whole point of the show, is to tell you, look, you're not in possession of all the facts. Well, there's a couple of pieces out, one of which is by radical Democrat Carly Provenza. And the reason I say radical is she is very much the Democrats' Democrat. And she's got an op-ed out that, hey, Carly, if you want to come on the program and talk about your op-ed, I would love to sit down and talk with you about it. And frankly, my friends, she's just not telling you the truth on some of it. And most of it, she's just completely overblowing it. So anyway, lots to talk about on the show today. We're going to begin with the Middle East. Oh, I guess I should tell you, if you want to be part of the program, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. If you want to talk about this land provision in the big beautiful bill, or if you want to talk about Israel and Iran, go ahead and give me a call. One more time, the phone number is 307-374-8989. But we begin this morning with a piece in Fox News. And it's entitled, Trump Lashes Out at Israel and Iran with Profanity for Breaking the Ceasefire. I'm going to play that video for you in just a second, but wow, was Trumpy kind of ticked off this morning. Let's go to the piece, and I quote, President Donald Trump spoke to reporters Tuesday before departing for the NATO summit, saying that Israel and Iran don't know what the bleep they're talking about or what they're doing following his declaration of a ceasefire. President Donald Trump expressed deep frustration with both Israel and Iran Tuesday, saying that the two countries don't know what the blank they're doing. Trump made these comments while departing from the White House for a NATO summit Tuesday morning. Both Israel and Iran fired missiles at one another following the imposition of a ceasefire on Monday night. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours and you don't go out in the first hour and drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them, and I'm not happy with Iran either. And I'm really unhappy if Israel is going to go out this morning. There's been a lot of back and forth. First thing this morning between Israel and Iran. But the good news here is we allegedly have a ceasefire. Iran, and I think that this was coming anyway. Iran has been taking a pounding for the last 12 days. And that's what they're calling this now, the 12-day war. But they've been taking a pounding, both from Israel and from the United States. Of course, the U.S.'s involvement in this whole thing was to take out their nuclear facilities. And I think it was only a matter of time until Iran finally said, you know what, we've had enough, and we're ready to sit down. But here's the other thing about it. You can't trust anything that Iran says. They operate much like Hamas in Gaza, and Hezbollah and the Houthi rebels and all of them. And of course, Iran is the big grandfather of all of those people or all of those groups. And so where do you think they learned it from? But the playbook is, create a big mess, get in a conflict, and then when you're getting your tail kicked, said, okay, cry uncle and say, we've had enough, we'll sit down at the table. Now, the question is, do they actually mean it? History shows us that you can't trust anything that Iran says. But President Donald Trump is taking them at their word. I'm sure that it's trust but verify. But allegedly this morning, and I guess this came out yesterday afternoon, about 4 o'clock-ish, Mountain Time anyway, that they do have a ceasefire in place, and that's supposed to take effect today, I believe. Anyway, Trump was talking to reporters this morning, and it was pretty clear that he was none too happy with what was happening between Israel and Iran. And it was mostly it was mostly Israel's doing, from what I understand. But anyway, let me get this video queued up for you. You're gonna love this one. It's probably the most angry that I've seen Donald Trump. So here we go.
Happy with Israel. When I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because the one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the...
Okay, so the video stopped right there, but I think that you can probably guess what he said, and it was very much they don't know what the F they're doing. Pretty angry. I've never seen Trump that vocal, but I guess if we're going through everything we are right now, and you have the potential for World War III to erupt in the Middle East. And you have a potential for a ceasefire right now, I think that any one of us would be pretty irritated too. But now you can see that Trumpy, none too happy with Israel and Iran this morning. And so we'll see what happens later on today, but that's where we're at this 10 seconds. And, like I say, it's... I don't think that we should trust anything that Iran is saying. They haven't been exactly trustworthy at all for any of this stuff. And, they are one of the countries that will agree to something and then break it. How many times did they agree to limitations on their nuclear program and then do exactly the opposite? The uranium enrichment, which I covered this on the podcast yesterday, they've completely violated every single agreement that they've been a part of. And admittedly, with the Barack Obama administration, the JCPOA, that was the worst agreement that had ever been made. It would guarantee that Iran had a nuclear weapon within, a very short amount of time. But Iran is not an honest broker, and it's very difficult to come to an agreement with somebody who's just flat lying to you. But there was a flare-up over at CNN, as you can imagine, between their token conservative, Scott Jennings, and a couple of other idiots on their panel. And I mean, and all the people that are political commentators that they have, nobody knows who they are. And nobody knows who this person that I'm going to tell you about is either. But evidently, she was some spokesman for the DNC. But this one's entitled, Scott Jennings Torches Ex-DNC Flack Over Iran Strikes. Fiery but mostly peaceful Iran butchers. Is that what you're saying? The Democratic National Committee spokeswoman, Xochitl Hinojosa, see, again, nobody knows who this person is, claimed on Sunday that she'd seen no evidence thus far that Iran posed a direct and present threat to the United States. And CNN Republican commentator Scott Jennings fired back immediately. During a panel discussion on CNN's State of the Union, Jennings pointed to decades of Iranian threats against Americans, American interests, and allies, saying that they amounted to nearly a constant threat. And he's absolutely accurate. How many times has the Ayatollah and, the presidents of Iran, even though the president really isn't in control of Iran, said death to America, death to Israel, and death to America, death to the great Satan? I mean, and it was only a couple of days ago where the Ayatollah was saying that very thing. So this country is bent on destroying the United States of America, and anybody who tries to argue the opposite of that clearly doesn't know what they're talking about. But it's an interesting exchange. Let's hear. Take a listen to it. Fiery but mostly peaceful protests, I guess.
I think that there are a lot of questions that are being raised by Congress right now. And the reason that they're being raised is because normally you would need congressional approval.
Okay, and again, this is the DNC spokesperson that nobody knows who she is. So just, again, let's continue.
For something like this, and I know that my friend here is laughing a little bit, but I will say,
I will covered Congress for a long time, but they gave a lot of that away.
But I will say, in order for the president to take action without congressional approval, he needed to show that there was a real, true threat to the United States and that the strike would not cause escalation.
Okay, all right, stop right there. Monday's edition of the podcast, I talked about this entire thing, and let me just see if I can sum it up really quickly for you. There's two provisions in the Constitution that talk about war. One of them is Article 2, Section 2, and it says that the president is the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The other one is Article 1, Section 8, and it only says that Congress has the power to declare war. So there's those two provisions. Now, clearly, if you're going to go to war, you have to ask for Congress, though the last war that we actually had an official declaration in was World War II. And that was, if I remember right, it was against Romania, Bavaria, and Hungary. But that's the last time that we actually declared war. Everything after that, Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, there were no declarations of war. Now, recently, we've been operating under the authorization for the use of military force. And that's still in effect and has not been repealed. There's the War Powers Act of 1973 that was passed, and President Nixon's veto was overridden in that one in response to the Vietnam War. And essentially what it says is that the president has 48 hours to brief Congress on why he ordered military strikes somewhere. But that's all it is. It's just a book report of what's been going on. And then if that conflict continues, he has 60 to 90 days to request a declaration of war from Congress. So that's the War Powers Act of 1973. And now we have the authorization for the use of military force. And I don't know. I mean, I think that there's a credible argument to be made that the AUMF is entirely unconstitutional. But it's in place right now, and it hasn't really been challenged. So, I mean, that's the law as it sits right now. But it's still in effect, and it hasn't been repealed. So every way you look at the strikes in Iran, President Trump was entirely legal. I mean, all of it was. There's no way that you can get around that. Secondarily, those people who were calling for impeachment votes and calling what the president did unconstitutional, It's incredibly hypocritical. In 2016 alone, listen to these numbers. Barack Obama dropped 12,192 bombs on Syria without a declaration of war. He dropped 12,095 bombs on Iraq without a declaration of war. 1,337 on Afghanistan, 496 in Libya, 35 in Yemen, 14 in Somalia, and 3 in Pakistan. And that was all in 2016. None of those had a declaration of war, and the Democrats really didn't say anything about it. Now, I'm not claiming that there wasn't Republicans saying, hey, he needs to come to Congress and ask for our permission. There were. Now, I don't remember the big uproar. I don't remember Congress getting all tied up in knots asking for his impeachment. I'm sure that they did. I'm sure some of them did. But it wasn't nearly as loud as it is right now. So any of the Democrats that are calling for Trump's impeachment over the airstrike in Iran, incredibly hypocritical. And secondarily, they're completely off the mark because the president is absolutely in the right. So let's go ahead and finish up, and you can hear what Scott Jennings said. It's actually kind of funny.
Problem with this is that normally you would have a group of lawyers from all across the agencies that actually would make these determinations. Trump did away with that at the beginning of this administration. So it's unclear what type of legal advice Trump was getting. Department of Defense usually puts out a statement.
I can't take it. So here's a Democrat claiming that the president fired all the lawyers and he's not getting any advice whatsoever and he's just doing everything he can all willy-nilly. That's not even close to true. See, the Democrats, they just continually make stuff up out of thin air, and they'll lob an accusation, and they'll just hope that they're correct about it. And when and if it's disproven, they'll just back away from it. It's like, oh, well, that's what it looked like, and they'll just make it an excuse. But, I mean, just completely disingenuous. All right, let's see if I can get through the rest of this without having to interrupt it again. Here we go.
And says what the legality is of any strike that the president is taking without congressional action. Here, we have not heard from DOD what is happening there. So what will be critical in the weeks to come is Congress must see the underlying intelligence about how they were in direct threat and how the U.S. needed to respond without congressional approval. But as of right now, I have not seen that.
You're arguing that after 46 years of the Iranian regime killing Americans, threatening Americans, saying over and over and over again, death to America, that maybe they were just didn't mean it, that they're fiery but mostly peaceful Iranian butchers? I mean, I don't understand. This is a righteous struggle.
But what you have the last
not
word.
exactly the
Well, you all
Fiery but mostly peaceful butchers. Well, he's exactly correct, though. And Scott Jennings, the guy that you heard talking, he is the token conservative. Well, I mean, he's about the only one that appears regularly on CNN. But he's exactly right. I mean, this is no different than what the Democrats called all of the protests, which, by the way, I've got another piece that's to talk about that a little bit later on in the program. But it's what the Democrats always do. It's mostly peaceful and fiery butchers, mostly peaceful protests. But again, Democrats make accusations without any proof whatsoever. And then when and if they are disproven or proven to be, inaccurate, then they kind of back away from it. But nothing stops them from lobbing accusations at the front end, which is pretty much what they do all of the time. And speaking of people that lob accusations, did you know that there is a newspaper or a so-called news outlet in Tehran? Now, okay, so all autocratic and dictatorial regimes have newspapers. There's one in Pyongyang in North Korea. There's the Chinese news outlets, but all of them are state-run television or state-run news. This one is called the Tehran Times, and the label right underneath it is a straight truth. Let me see if I can show it to you here. Hold on just a second. And by the way, the Agent 29 is going to be back tomorrow, and I cannot wait. It's about time that he stop messing around and get back to work. Let's see here. Here we go. Presentation. Nope. Hold on here. Anyway, so let's get into the article, and while I'm talking about it, I'll tee this up. But anyway, it's from the Tehran Times. Straight truth. Your treasuries pay for the bombs. Get out while you can. Quote, the war has started. The United States has launched its military campaign against Iran. Well, that's demonstrably true. They absolutely have. And however, let me just read it to you. Military campaign against Iran. Behind the scenes, however, lies a chilling truth that many of the Persian Gulf states, Asian investors, and global institutions that have funded this war through U.S. Treasury holdings may now be at risk themselves. Here we go. You check this out. Yep, there you go. Your treasuries pay for the bombs. Get out while you can. Just absolutely incredible. Okay, so these entities, whether sovereign wealth funds, central banks, or private investment firms, are not just economic actors. They are financial accomplices to a war that threatens their own security, economies, and populations. The billions poured into U.S. debt markets over the past decade have directly supported the weapons, logistics, and infrastructure that is now being used to strike Iranian targets. Take the UAE, for example, which holds $120 billion of U.S. treasuries through its federal government, central bank, and sovereign wealth giants like ADIA. And let's see here. Anyway, I don't even want to read any more of this thing. But what it is the Iranians trying to convince you that any investment in America is a bad decision. And the last part of this here, let's see here. Iran has made no secret of its ability to respond. Its missile capabilities, cyber warfare units, and regional friends are ready to act. Iran could and likely will target the economic lifelines and strategic assets of those who enabled the war. So Iran doesn't have anything militarily left. I mean, their country has been devastated. Israel has literally tried to come very close to bombing them into the Stone Age. And so I don't see any reason why they are a threat militarily at all, for that matter. And so the only thing they have left is to claim that they're going to attack the economic infrastructure of the United States. And now that brings up another interesting point. The Biden administration let in hundreds and hundreds of Iranian citizens completely undocumented into this country. And I've heard varying numbers all weekend long. They range from 700 Iranian citizens to I was listening to an interview with Tom Homan, and he claimed that it was 1,200 Iranian citizens. Who really knows? I mean, most of them were gotaways, and the Biden administration didn't make any effort to stop them. And so there are a number of Iranian citizens that are walking free in the United States. And, maybe what they could be doing is sabotaging U.S. technology. I mean, that's entirely, there could be a terrorist attack. There could be a whole bunch of things. So in any case, let's see here. But let me just check this out. So I've got a picture of them trying to sabotage American technology. Check this out. Here we go. Breaking. The Houthis have begun sabotaging U.S. technology through the region in retaliation for all the strikes in Iran. That's exactly right. I'm sure that's the case. And they're probably even far less coordinated than I forget the name of those little guys in Star Wars. It's been so long since I watched. I'm more of a Star Trek geek anyway. So we've got a ceasefire, and Iran is claiming they're going to destroy the American economy. So we'll see how that works out. Let's see here. How are we doing time-wise? You know what? Let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, I've got a number of articles talking about the job market and how millennials are actually handling it. So we'll take a quick break, and we'll come back and talk about it. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. Now, speaking of these millennials, I don't think that any of them really know how to work. Most of them have been coddled their entire lives. Why should we assume that any of them could keep and hold down a job? Anyway, we'll talk about it here in just a second. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. And don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics Podcast, Wyoming's most listened to conservative program. Welcome back to the show, my friends. I'm David Iverson, your illustrious host. If you want to be part of the program, the phone number in the studio is 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call, and whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk about it. Whether it's this land grab that everybody completely is misunderstanding, or if it's Israel and Iran or anything else that's on your mind. So give me a call if you want to. 307-374-8989. Now, I know that this is going to come as a gigantic shock to you, but the Inspector General has found rampant abuse and fraud of recent work under the Biden administration. And it's all about remote work or work from home. Now, of course, we all remember back to COVID times when it was 2 weeks to stop the spread, and then another 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks, and then another 2 weeks. In some states, it was 6 months to stop the spread, and some of them continued over a year, keeping kids out of school. Most of it was a sham. It didn't take that long for the virus to mutate and become far less it was more infectious, but far less dangerous. I myself contracted COVID, and being a type 1 diabetic that I am, I didn't really have all that much difficulty with it. Just took my ivermectin, and I was good to go. But for months, and in some cases years afterwards, the federal government and the Biden administration allowed people to continue to work from home for no reason whatsoever. It's just they liked being able to work in their jammies. And I quote from the Post-Millennial, "Federal workers under the Biden administration would frequently violate remote work policies, according to a report from the Inspector General for the Office of Personnel Management. OPM released a statement on Friday regarding the report and said that it, quote, uncovered widespread compliance failures and weak internal oversight in the agency's telework and remote work programs during the Biden administration. The statement was titled, quote, IG report reveals rampant telework abuse under Biden. Under the previous administration, under the previous administration, OPM's telework and remote work policies were mismanaged and oversight was virtually non-existent. That era of telework abuse is over. At President Trump's direction, OPM has restored in-person operations to ensure federal employees are working for the taxpayers." Now, the report uncovered that 58.1% of telework employees who were sampled for the report did not meet the requirements of working in office under the Biden administration. Around 1 in 3 teleworkers, or 29.7%, had agreements to work remotely that had lapsed. 15% were remote workers, did not have a remote agreement on file, and around 8% of workers had timesheets that were not meeting requirements for telework policies. Although the report did not get into all the reasons for the failures to meet basic policy requirements for remote work, the report gave possible explanations such as weak or missing management controls, negligence, and internal fraud and abuse. We recommend that if the OPM retains or reinstates its telework and remote programs, they should develop written procedures. Now, who would have saw a fraud and abuse coming when you allow people to not even have to get up and go into the office in the morning, when they can work in their jammies, when there's no requirements for them to actually produce anything? The Biden administration did everything it was humanly possible to thwart any sort of efficient government because, and I think this is becoming more clear, is that there was a ton of money that was moving around through NGOs and, different fraudulent schemes. And a lot of it was exactly how Biden ran all of his personal finances. Isn't that amazing? If you hire a guy to be the president who has a complete S show, Adam Schiff show, in his personal finances, who he's financed by all sorts of foreign governments, and nobody can make heads or tails of it, that the administration that he manages, his administration, when you do the final analysis, is going to be equally as convoluted and rampant with fraud. It makes perfect sense. But that's the case. That's what was happening in the Biden administration. And this is a fascinating phenomenon. I never would have guessed that it would happen so quickly. But I remember when Trump came out and said that we're going to give stimulus checks to everybody. And, I personally, I didn't think that was warranted. My stimulus check went to allegedly buying a couple of firearms and a couple of other things because I didn't really need it. And the truth is that a lot of people didn't need that cash to just flow into their bank account. Now, I really didn't expect the results of it. That being that it completely dismantled the American work ethic. I never would have thought you would have saw vast amounts of people just not return to work. And think about it, it happened really, really fast. There were all of a sudden, in most states, COVID was over. Here in the Cowboy state, it lasted, a month or so, and then it was over. Everybody was back to work, and everything was open again, or a couple of months anyway. But even here, the jobless rate went up exponentially. It was now normally when you drive around, any Wyoming town, you're going to see help wanted signs all over the place. But in Buffalo, where I used to live, and in Sheridan, you could drive anywhere and you'd see a help wanted sign. A lot of restaurants would have signs saying, "Hey, sorry for the change in hours, but we're closing because we can't find good help." And I attribute that to the stimulus checks. Well, this is kind of metastasized. And there's another piece, and I think this one is from the Post Millennial as well. No, it's not. It's from the New York Post. Generation Z has unbelievable job requirements, including nap rooms and ping pong, according to a survey. And I quote, "They really are Generation Z with another Z and another Z." Nearly 1 in 6 Americans under the age of 28 won't even consider taking a job unless there's a designated snooze space at the office, a mind-boggling new survey has found. Quote, "It's clear that Generation Z isn't shy about voicing what they want from today's workplace. And for many, it goes beyond salary and health insurance," said Amanda Augustin, a certified professional career coach and resident expert for resume building website Resume.io, which polled 1,000 professionals across the country about their must-have perks while evaluating job opportunities. And you're not going to believe this. Most of these, absolutely incredible to me. But here we go. Nearly 1 in 6 Americans aged up to 28 won't even consider taking a job unless there's a designated napping space. For them, napping on the clock and other demands aren't just nice-to-have extras. They reflect a shifting view around the work-life balance and overall well-being, Augustin said. 1 in 5 Generation Z folks, more than any other generation, say a fun room, complete with games like ping pong and other recreational activities, is essential to their work environment, the starting survey results reveal. And this brings up, there was a TikTok video or YouTube video of when Elon Musk purchased Twitter. And the person in the video is walking around and showing all the ridiculous things that existed in the Twitter office building, nap rooms and a sauna and all sorts of crazy. And during the break, I'll see if I could find that so that I can show you pictures of that. But let's see here. Well, 1 in 5 wouldn't even consider a position if the company's offices are not pet friendly. So you have to be able to bring Fido to the office, compared to 14% of millennials aged 29 to 44, 8% of 40 to 65-year-old Generation Xers, and only 40% of baby boomers aged 61 to 79. Most Generation Zers, 33%, expect free snacks and lunches at the workplace, more than any of their older coworkers, the poll found. And even if an office isn't up to snuff, and if it isn't up to snuff, they just don't even show up. They'll take a job and just not even show up for the first day. A whopping 1 in 3 said a 4-day work week is non-negotiable, and 1 in 4 expect extended sabbatical leaves for personal development and travel. None of these things have anything to do with actual work. This is I really think that this is a repercussion of how we handled COVID. And also, it's a good example of how generations change. Now, our generation, my generation, our parents grew up during the 1960s and 1970s, and many of them, when they had children, it was all like, peace and love and Woodstock and all of that stuff, but they still had a work ethic. Now, my parents were different. We owned a sporting goods store, and my sister and I had schedules in the store from a very young age. I think I was managing that sporting goods store when I was like 14 or 15, or, effectively managing it. Parents would go out of town, and who was in charge? I was. But in any case, you have a generation that, grew up during the 1960s and 70s, and then they have children, and they raise them how, and teach them things that, they thought were failing in their own childhood. And then those people have children, and it just gets progressively worse. And what we're seeing now is a whole bunch of people that were raised by parents that didn't hold them accountable for anything and didn't give them responsibilities for anything. And now the result is a whole bunch of folks that think you have to have a ping pong table, bring your pet, and have free snacks and a nap while you're at work. Absolutely incredible. And you wonder why America is falling behind in innovation and technology. And while we outsource all of the necessary things, we have medicine, for example. For a very long time, America was the world leader in technology and medicine. Almost all of the great medical advances happened right here. Almost all of the great technological advances until the rise of Japan and China in the technology sector, most of those happened right here. But not so much anymore, because innovation and hard work and critical thinking have kind of gone out the window. And I think it's very clear when you look at reports like this that most Generation Z folks have to be able to take a snooze at work, or they're not going to take a job at all, which kind of begs the question, how productive are they actually going to be when they're at work? This is why I have great respect for people like Mike Rowe. He's got the big foundation, Mike Rowe Works, and he tries to showcase organizations and schools that teach people skills. The truth is, and I think that one of the places where we really went wrong is thinking that everybody had to go to college. The truth is that people are different. People have different aptitudes. Some people are not cut out for college. Some folks are smarter than others. Some folks are more talented with their hands. The Agent 29, great example. He is a brilliant carpenter. I mean, one of these times I'll try to get him to show some pictures on the show of some of the work that he's done. Absolutely incredible. We need skilled carpenters and plumbers and electricians. We need people in the trades, which is why, the Wyotech is one of the foremost technology schools in the country, right outside of Laramie, Wyoming. And it's interesting that it's in the same town as the University of Wyoming, one of the most liberal institutions. And I'm sure if you ranked all the liberal state universities, the University of Wyoming would be right up at the top. But it's interesting that they're in the same town. And, one of them turns out incredible employees, that learn skills, welding and, auto repair and diesel mechanics and all of that. And the other turns out people that have degrees in women's studies. And it's, and again, I mean, it's absolutely infuriating. And let me just back up on all of this. Just because you have a different skill doesn't mean that your employment is any less valuable, is any less needed, or is, any more or less important than any other. Just because you happen to be a lawyer, that doesn't mean that your occupation is more important than the hairstylist. I know a lot of hairstylists that make a tremendous amount of money that are very, very busy, very, very successful. I know a lot of carpenters like Agent 29 that they do amazing work. Plumbers. It's pretty hard to have a business without some plumbing. And there's a reason why a plumber, an electrician, and, a tradesman, why they're so expensive, because our trades are dying because we're not teaching our students, how to work. And most of them don't know how to work anyway. Another one of my good friends, he's a plumber. Expert plumber. I mean, he's done a lot of work. You name it, the guy can plumb it. Well, he's since moved back home, but for a while he went through a year where I think he went through 4 different apprentices, and which is amazing because all you have to do to be an apprentice is do what the boss tells you. Well, he told me that one of the big problems he had with keeping apprentices is he couldn't keep them off the phone. And, they demanded that they have to have their phone in their hand while they're working. And if they wouldn't do that, he would fire them. And think about how simple that is, right? You're at work. You're supposed to be working. And when you're in the trades, it's you're being billed time. They're billing time and materials. So time is money. And if you're sitting around on your telephone, it's very difficult to bill you for any actual work that you did. So, I mean, we need a radical shift in how we view work. Now, I don't know exactly how we get there. I think one of the good first step would be to radically decrease the amount of funding going to the University of Wyoming. They have an endowment. The number escapes me, but it's a heck of a lot of money. But they have an endowment big enough to let everybody that wants to go to the University of Wyoming do so at no charge. Radically decrease the amount of federal funding. Force them to have programs that students actually want to take that are going to benefit them later in life. The whole point behind the University of Wyoming is that it was to be a land grant university. That's what it is, to teach students agriculture and trades and to educate them in how to live a good life. But we've moved far beyond that. And if you take a walk around the University of Wyoming, it is amazing at how they've spent money. Now, I do want to have a really good school. I do want to have nice buildings. I want it to be really nice. But the last time I was there, I went to the Charlie Kirk event, and I was kind of walking on a back walkway to get to the auditorium where the event was being held. And on a back walkway, there were statues lining it. And this wasn't even like a major thoroughfare. It was off of a secondary street in Laramie, and I kind of ducked between a couple of buildings to get up to the auditorium. And I was absolutely amazed at the amount of money that has been spent at the University of Wyoming. And it's very clear that they just think that the money spigot is never going to turn off and that they can just spend money however they want. Well, that has created a university that turns out students that don't really have any marketable skills. When you have a degree in women's studies, about the only place you're going to ever work is at another university. And so, my friends, we need a radical shift in how we view work. Work in and of itself is valuable. If you can do and there's dignity in it, right? If you can do what you enjoy doing, like this program, I mean, it is incredibly rewarding. And I know I talk about this. I don't talk about this enough, that I wouldn't be able to do what I do without you, the folks that listen to me. And I never would have thought when I started this program how big of a place that you, my audience, would take up in my life. I mean, it is, I absolutely love what I'm doing, and it is the highlight of my day to be able to sit down behind a microphone and talk to you, or frankly, to talk to you whenever I want about anything. And, because you listen to the program, you allow me to do what I want to do, what I'm good at doing. And so I'm very, very appreciative. But see, there's value in broadcasting. There's value in free speech. There's value in information and opinion. Now, I don't claim to be an expert on a whole bunch of things, but the fact that I can transmit information to you is valuable. And it is a craft. It is a skill that's learned. And if you, man, just play podcast roulette sometime, and you can see how many different podcasts there are from people who, frankly, don't really know what they're doing. Not to say that this program is expert in any way, but there is a reason why it's on the top 100 podcast, on the list of the top 100 podcasts you need to listen to this year. There's a reason why Cowboy State Politics is there. But anyway, I've gotten way off topic. Let's see here. How are we doing time-wise? You know what? We're a little bit early, so let's go ahead and do another story, and then we'll take a quick break. I'm assuming that you saw Senator Alex Padilla. Now, I'm pretty sure you have no idea who he is. I didn't until the little flap with Kristi Noem. Well, he got tossed out of that press briefing, and that's what it was, for being, kind of belligerent. Then he immediately went to the floor of the U.S. Senate and said that rhetoric, quote, rhetoric compelled him to do what he did. From the Post-Millennial, Senator Alex Padilla claims that the incident at the Kristi Noem presser was unplanned. Rhetoric compelled me. And I quote, California Senator Alex Padilla, which, interestingly enough, interesting that he is from a big, huge state like California, and really nobody knows who he is. That pretty much tells you he doesn't do a whole heck of a lot. Anyway, he's defending his viral confrontation with Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem, insisting that the June 12th incident in Los Angeles was spontaneous and unplanned. Padilla appeared on PMS NBC with hosts Eugene Daniels and Jonathan Capehart to push back on accusations that the encounter was staged. He responded by explaining that the altercation was not planned, but that Noem's rhetoric compelled him to interrupt her at the press conference. All right, so I've got a video of Alex Padilla at that little presser, and I'm just gonna play it for you, and then we'll continue with the piece. But take a look at this.
Guys, ready? And bell. Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary.
Okay, notice him pushing back
on the officers. A half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your...
He's still resisting, and he's being pushed out, and it's going to go into the hallway here in just a second. And notice that he's still fighting. Okay, now he puts his hand up.
On the ground.
Okay, and they're going to arrest him. So let me rewind this. Let's watch it again.
And bell. Sir, hands up. I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary, because the fact of the matter is a half a dozen violent criminals that you're rotating on your...
All right. That's enough. Okay, so Padilla... Let's turn that off. There we go. So all he would have had to do was stand up there like a normal person and just raise his hand. And he could have announced himself to Kristi Noem, and she probably would have called on him and said, Senator, what do you have to say? But instead, he rushed the stage, and you could see in the video where he was fighting with officers. And if you're gonna rush the stage at any sort of event, I mean, it doesn't really matter what it is, but if you're going to do that, you should expect that you're going to be escorted out. And if you continue fighting, then you're going to be arrested. So the question is, does Senator Padilla know that? Absolutely. If it was his event and somebody was rushing the stage, he would absolutely have them removed. Second, and it's really hard to see in the video, but he wasn't wearing his congressional pin. I know that seems like a silly thing, but elected representatives, even in the state of Wyoming, if they're on official business, usually they have the name badge. And that says who they are and what they're doing there. So that name badge, and actually, interestingly enough, it's the name badge that can get them out of a ticket. So in Wyoming, an elected representative or senator cannot be arrested on their way to legislative activity. Not to saying that the state troopers can't follow them to the Capitol and then arrest them, but they can't be arrested on their way there. Same thing holds true for U.S. senators and U.S. congresspeople. But he wasn't wearing a pin, and the reason why is he wasn't acting in his official capacity. Now, when he went to the Senate floor and complained about it, he said that he was So we've got a difference of opinion going here. But let's continue with the piece here. Padilla, let's see here. You heard him say, "I'm Senator Alex Padilla. I have questions for the secretary" during the event. Now, his recent comments came in response to criticism from Vice President J.D. Vance, who last week referred to him as Jose Padilla and dismissed the incident as pure political theater. That's what I think it was. Padilla rejected that claim, saying that he was carrying out his congressional duties. Quote, "Part of our job is oversight and accountability, exactly what this administration does not want, and so they'll try to throw any hurdle or any roadblock to keep us from our oversight and accountability role. That's all I was doing, right? Not so much. Notice that he wasn't wearing his congressional pin, he wasn't dressed in a suit, he was dressed in his, whatever that thing was, his, leisure suit or exercise clothes or whatever you want to call it, but clearly not in his official capacity. And had he been, I doubt very seriously that he would have rushed the stage." Quote, he says, "That press conference, as you know, I did not barge in. I was escorted in. I did not lunge at the secretary." It looks pretty clearly from the video that he did. "I had the audacity to ask a question as he rushed the stage. I heard there was a press conference, asked to join, and they opened the door for me, and I sat quietly on the side until the rhetoric compelled me to speak up, not just as a senator, but as an American." So it was Kristi Noem's rhetoric that caused him to act in the unprofessional way that he did. All of us would absolutely act in that way. No, we wouldn't. Now, I've seen some rowdy press conferences, some rowdy public appearances by public officials, but I very rarely see anybody rush the stage. I've seen a lot of different Democrat protesters protest loudly from the back, and when they're asked to quiet down, generally speaking, they do. At a couple of instances, I've heard the speaker say, "Now, if you don't quiet down and let me finish, I will have you escorted out." I've seen that. But to get escorted out, well, you kind of have to rush the stage, which is exactly what Padilla did. Now, he specifically objected to Noem's remarks about California leadership. Quote, "Just the notion that they're suggesting that it's their job to liberate Los Angeles from our duly elected mayor and governor, it is too much." So that is what he was responding to. He was trying to defend Governor Gavin Newsom and that Bass woman. Padilla was forcibly removed from the press conference as the Secret Service thought he was an attacker. Video from the incident showed Padilla being put into handcuffs and removed from the room. When asked about the incident, Noem responded, "I don't even know the senator. He didn't request a meeting or to speak with me. So when I leave here, I'll have a conversation with him and visit and find out really what his concerns are." So Kristi Noem didn't have any idea who he was. He didn't really announce himself as he claimed that he did on the Senate floor. So absolutely, it was completely justified for him to be removed from that press event, as he should have been. I mean, and again, if you're going to act like a fool, if you're going to play stupid games, you're going to win stupid prizes. And I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Everybody knows that, except, of course, a Democrat senator. When we come back, the socialist mayor or mayoral candidate in New York. There's more fun and games where that came from. Back in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson. Wyoming's conservative voice, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. And, you know, the views of the host on this program are not necessarily the views of you, though they should be. From the New York Post, New York Socialist. See, that's yet another example why I need Agent 29 to keep up with all this video stuff so I can just do what I was meant to be doing. And that's how you know that what your job is what you were meant to do, is that you just focus on it and you enjoy what you're doing each and every day. And that's where I'm at, my friends. And I really enjoy talking about socialists, especially people that openly admit that they're socialists. Now, the New York Post it has been covering Zoran Mamdani. He is running for New York City mayor, and he is an admitted socialist. Now, before I tell you what his next plan is, let's just do a quick recap. Last week, I brought you some sound bites from Mr. Mamdani that were taken from what's called the Bulwark podcast. Now, the Bulwark podcast, the guy tries to be a little bit conservative. He's very much anti-Trump, which, I mean, I don't necessarily think that just because you don't like Trump that you aren't conservative. However, I think that you should probably consider some of your policy positions, because I don't know, there's not too many of them that you could disagree with Trump on and still claim to be a conservative. But anyway, during that podcast, he said some crazy things about capitalism, which, I mean, if you're an admitted socialist, that's kind of one of the things that you're against. But I played this soundbite for you last week, but here he is, and he's being asked, and I forget the name of the Bulwark podcast host. I'm not really a fan. It's one of those podcasts where you listen to it and you say, yeah, this isn't really all that great a quality. And another thing that kind of irritates me, there's a lot of swearing in it. I had this English professor in college. Her name was Dr. Linda Ross. I'll never forget her. And she always said that there are so many wonderful words in the dictionary, so many insulting words that you could use. Only an idiot would result to profanity. And I've never forgotten that. And if you want to know why, when I start the podcast, there's all sorts of different words, and then I attempt to, broaden your horizon with new words. It's for two reasons. One, I don't want to insult your intelligence, and so why would I swear on the program? Secondly, I just don't really like it. I think it's very off-putting. And frankly, when people swear, people that are intelligent enough not to, it really, really lowers my opinion of their argument, and it should for you too. And I've got friends that every other word out of their mouth is the F word, and what immediately goes through my mind when I'm talking to them is, man, couldn't you choose a different word? Isn't there, a more entertaining word that you've found in the dictionary? Do you even know what a dictionary is? And so anyway, here he is talking to this Bulwark podcast guy. And to his credit, the host questions him on his views of capitalism. Listen to this.
Of concern. We'll move through them quickly. Okay?
Let's go.
Are you ready? Number one is, as I mentioned earlier, capitalism. You tweeted, taxation isn't theft, capitalism is. You also want to seize the means of produce production in New York City. I would like to hear your thoughts on both those topics.
Yeah, so I would say judging me by my tweets sends me down a long road.
I have some bad tweets too, but it's right there. You want to be mayor? You're saying capitalism is theft. That seems bad.
What I've said over the course of this campaign is what I would focus on, and what my critiques of capitalism have been and continue to be is that this inequality is a feature of it. And if we do not have a focus on how we actually extend that understanding of dignity that every New Yorker deserves and make it a reality.
All right. I can't take it. But classic politician response. What I've said during this campaign, I'll continue to say, political BS. I'm trying to get around it. And then he says, well, all this inequality, it's a result of capitalism. It's not inequality. Everybody has the same freedom of opportunity as everybody else. Just because you're not talented enough or you're not smart enough or you don't work hard enough is not an indictment of the system in which we live, the economic and political system that we live in. It's an indictment of your effort and your ability. And trust me, even if you're not smart enough to be able to do job X, Y, or Z, doesn't mean that you can't do another job and be very successful at it and make a very good living. Inequality is this joke that socialists and those in the Democrat Party use that try to create the idea that it is systemic in our culture. Inequality isn't systemic. It's not systemic to capitalism. It's not a negative effect of capitalism. We have to allow the free market to operate. That is what has created the most profitable, the most generous, the most powerful nation that this country has ever seen. We have to have the freedom to take hold of whatever opportunities are put in front of us. And just because you're not as successful as somebody else, maybe you ought to try something else. Thomas Edison said that he didn't invent the light bulb. He found 500 ways that it didn't work, but he kept at it. And the truth is, whatever your chosen field of expertise is, if you work hard and you apply yourself, you will be successful at it. I'm not saying that you're going to be, financially successful. I'm not saying that you're going to end up being rich with any chosen profession. What I am saying, though, is that if you try and you work hard, you will be successful at whatever it is that you're doing. If you're a hairstylist and you continue to educate yourself and you become an expert in your craft, you're going to have more people walk through the door. That's just common sense. It doesn't create a systemic system of inequality like this idiot Mamdani says. Now, you know what? While we're at it, I should just play the rest of this soundbite for you, because what he says is that he wants to set up government grocery stores, and it's absolutely incredible. It's like socialists, they're not students of history, and if they were, they wouldn't be socialists, because socialism has always resulted in the deaths, in misery and poverty and death. But what you hear all these folks say is, well, they didn't do it right. This time we're going to do it right. It's democratic socialism, if your name is Bernie Sanders, which, by the way, democratic socialism is a complete oxymoron. But anyway, listen to the rest of what this Mamdani guy says. Whoopsie, there we go. Hold on. I'm going to have to go back to it. Capitalism.
It's of concern. We'll move through them.
How we actually extend that understanding of dignity that every New Yorker deserves and make it a reality. If you talk to New Yorkers, you'll say, yeah, everyone deserves public education, being able to go to a library, sanitation. But then there are certain things that we agree are just as critical, and yet we allow people to be priced in or out of those things, whether we're talking about housing or we're talking about produce. And I think that comes to your second point, is our proposal to create a pilot program for a network of municipal-owned grocery stores. Now, this is a program, to be clear, that would be one store in each borough, 5 stores across New York City. It would cost $60 million.
So we have 5 communist stores.
Okay, so just listen to this guy's response. It's absolutely incredible. Listen.
This might be an interesting test case to see how poorly it does compared to its neighbors.
No matter how you think about the idea, I do think that there should be more room for reasonable policy experimentation in our cities and in our country, where we actually test out our ideas. And if they work, they work. And if they don't work, c'est la vie. Then the idea was wrong. But the reason I think it would work is that this is less than half the cost of what the city's already spending on subsidizing corporate supermarkets through a program called City Fresh. The city's set to spend about $140 million through those subsidies, and it doesn't come with a guarantee of cheaper groceries. Doesn't come with a requirement to accept SNAP or WIC or to engage in collective bargaining. And over the more than 10 years that it's been in operation, we see just a few more than a dozen stores that have actually received this. And ultimately, the reason I think this could work is it's worked in Kansas. There's been a feasibility study done in Chicago about the urgency of it and and that it can actually be implemented. And that we are here in a city where if you're making $40K a year or $200K.
All right. I mean, the response of that guy is hilarious. This might be an interesting experiment to find out how quickly it fails. It's just absolutely incredible. You see, the socialists, Democrats, communists, all those people on the left, they really don't have any new ideas. And they always go back to the old ideas. Well, we need government food stores. Now, the interesting thing is, and later on in that soundbite, I'm not going to play it for you. He says, and I think he was in Chicago, and he said, where I used to live, they had one of these government food stores, and it went broke. They couldn't fill the shelves because they put the government food store, 30 miles from the Walmart. And Walmart can buy groceries at a huge amounts. Like their orders are gigantic. They go all over the country. So they get a much better price on all the stuff that they sell in your local Walmart. Government food store? Yeah, can't really do that. And it's not the government's job. And that's that's the main thing that all these socialists forget about, that it is not the government's job to feed you. That's your job. It's not the government's job to provide a store, to provide you gasoline or a place to live or any of those things. That's your job. Now, Mamdani, he evidently noticed that his anti-capitalist views weren't really resonating, so he had to come up with a new plan. From the New York Post, socialist mayor Zoran Mamdani wanted to abolish high school exams because, wait for it, they're racist. And I quote, socialist New York City mayor candidate Zoran Mamdani once pushed to abolish the city's admissions test for Gotham's elite public high schools because he thought it was racist. The Queens assemblyman, who is second only to ex-Governor Andrew Cuomo in most polls heading into Tuesday's Democratic mayoral primary, hasn't said much about the topic on the campaign, beyond telling Chalkbeat last week that, quote, he'd support an independent study of the socialized high schools admissions test for signal out gender and racial bias. However, when asked by Jim Oles' Liberal Democratic Club in February of 2022 to describe the legislation and policy changes he supports to address, quote, the ongoing effect of slavery, racism, colonialism, and discrimination, Mamdani, a former specialized test tutor, signaled out spiking at the SHSAT. As a graduate of Bronx science, I have personally witnessed just how segregated New York City public schools are, especially in specialized high school. Quote, I support measures to integrate our public schools and fully fund our education system, including abolishing that test. The test under state law is the sole criteria for entry into the city's elite public high schools, including Bronx High School of Science, Stuyvesant, and Brooklyn Tech. Cuomo spokesman Rich Azzopardi said the ex-governor has been and continues to be in favor to keep the exam as it is. Obviously, he is. But the idea that some people can't get into said school because it's racist is absolutely, it absolutely shows you how committed these folks are to their leftist agenda. And, it's just an example of trying to get equal outcomes for everybody. In America, we don't have equality of outcomes. We have equality of opportunity. You may not be as smart as the next guy, and you may not score as well on the test as the next guy. That doesn't mean the other person is any less valuable. It means they're not as smart as you. They're not as good at golf or baseball. They can't hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. That doesn't mean they're any less valuable. It just means they're not good at sports, and they should try another profession. In baseball, we don't say that everybody gets to hit a home run. If you can hit a home run, then you excel at that sport. Now, if you can't hit a home run and you strike out every time that you're at the plate, perhaps baseball is not the best occupation for you. Maybe you should choose something else, like being a plumber or an electrician. But to eliminate our standardized testing because you think it's racist, and I'm not arguing that there have never been any tests that weren't racist. Clearly, there have been in our past. There was all sorts of poll tests when we knew that the majority of African Americans in a given constituency couldn't read. I mean, there have been all sorts of those things, but we're way past that now. There's no need. And by the way, this whole reparations thing, I heard a good argument over the weekend that those aren't needed anymore. Nobody really needs a helping hand up. For the most part, there is no systemic racism in the country. You either excel or fail based on your own abilities. And, again, if you're not good at one thing, maybe you should move on to the next one. It's not my job to make sure that you can make a good living doing something that you're terrible at. That's ridiculous. But that is the end result of guys like the thought process of guys like Mamdani. Here's how the piece ends. Quote, a Mamdani campaign spokesperson said that he has, quote, no plans to oppose the current testing system if elected mayor, but declined to clarify why the poll is no longer calling for the test to be abolished. Because it didn't resonate with people. That's why he's not in favor of it anymore. It's the shotgun approach to politics. Throw everything you can against the wall, see what sticks, and then be in favor of that. Lick your finger, hold it up in the wind, and see which way the wind blows. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. But, I mean, that's how socialists have to operate because their ideas do not work, and they have not worked in the past. Similarly, the ideas of the Democrat Party, because they are based on class warfare, class envy, and failed socialist ideology, don't work in the real world either. The only place that they do work is in academia, on paper. And even then, there's faulty assumptions and flawed thinking that make you believe that those things actually work in the real world when they absolutely don't. We cannot, and I'm going to be watching this race just to see how New Yorkers vote. It would not surprise me in the least if New Yorkers elected a socialist, but it'd be a pretty sad commentary on where what was America's greatest city is now at. But I'll keep watching it, and I'll keep you posted on it. We're hearing, and moving on, and it's kind of like a broken record around here. Every day there's articles about illegal immigration, the border. And the reason for that is the Biden administration created such an emergency with their immigration policies that is something that we absolutely have to deal with. When you have small Wyoming towns that are having an illegal immigration problem, I mean, that's a pretty good indication that we might have a problem. Therefore, it was like 2 or 3 months straight. Just about every week in the rap sheet that comes out in the paper, there'd be, an arrest of an illegal immigrant, rather robbing cars or breaking into ATM machines or, getting arrested for speeding. And perhaps part of the reasons were right beside I-90 and really close to the Montana line. But it's, in my mind, it's a pretty sad commentary if you've got little Wyoming towns that are having an illegal immigration problem, whereas before Joe Biden, you would hardly ever see that problem. But now we have it. Well, in Michigan, and this is a sob story that was put out by an outlet called Michigan Live. And it tells the story of a couple that was pulled over for speeding, going 6 miles over the speed limit, and now they're facing deportation. Let me just give you the story, and then we'll talk about it. Quote, a Menominee County Sheriff's Office deputy stopped a couple on Wednesday, Menominee, Wisconsin. Interestingly enough, that's where my father's family is from. On Wednesday, April 9th, for going 61 and a 55. About 5 minutes later, Nicholas said that U.S. Customs and Border Protection showed up, even though they were roughly 200 miles from the Canadian border. Nicholas felt hopeless. Quote, it just sucks that we can't fix our status, even though we are persons of good character, he said. But the law is the law. All right, now, that might, if we just stop right there, that might lead you to believe that maybe there's some impediment to, Mr. whatever his name is, Nicholas, I guess. Maybe there's some sort of impediment to him entering the immigration process. Maybe there's some reason why he's been unable to get any sort of, immigration status changes. I don't know. I mean, roadblocks happen all the time where there's paperwork gets lost. Maybe there's something like that. Well, if you think that, you might be mistaken. Nicholas is a Mexican immigrant who's been living without legal status, get this, for nearly 20 years. And Magdalena Benitez, his girlfriend, now wife, who's 36, is also an illegal alien. The piece says undocumented, but we're just going to say illegal alien. They never expected to get picked up by border officials in a remote corner of Michigan. Now, why is an illegal alien couple living in rural Michigan? Because they never thought that they would be picked up by Border Patrol. I mean, it's the classic case of getting the heck out of Dodge and going to a town where you don't think that you're going to be noticed. Quote, they have no criminal records, their children are U.S. citizens, their families live here, but now they're facing deportation. So they've been in the country long enough to get married, to have kids, and they're employed by a group of people that are absolutely breaking U.S. law because they're employing illegal immigrants, which means they don't have the proper documentation to show them. But listen to how this thing continues. The arrest occurred under President Donald Trump's effort to aggressively ramp immigration enforcement, but it also underscores how traffic stops can be a pipeline to deportations, especially in Michigan, where U.S. Customs and Border Protection has authority to treat the entire state as a border zone. Because it is. Because it's right on the U.S.-Canada border. Now, Nicholas first moved to the U.S. in 1999. He spent his middle school and high school years living in Green Bay, Wisconsin, until his parents decided to briefly move back to Mexico. So he's been back and forth, and it's his parents that brought him over here. He then returned here in 2007 on a tourist visa so he could earn more money here. But because he was 18, Nicholas no longer qualified for DACA, the Obama-era policy that shields young adults who came here. And the Supreme Court has ruled that DACA program is unconstitutional, and the president didn't have any authority to put it into place anyway. But the plan was to wait for his younger brother, an 18-year-old who was born in the United States, to turn 21 and petition for his citizenship. Over the past 2 decades, though, Nicholas built his life here illegally. So you cannot tell me that there was not one single opportunity for him to become a citizen legally. Now, he came here in 2007 on a tourist visa, and he let that tourist visa expire, and he just stayed here, knowing that it was a problem. So Nicholas had a son, and this is where they get into talking about the sob story. Now married to Magdalena Benitez, who crossed the border 15 years ago to work on Wisconsin dairy farms. So she, too, has been in the country for a really long time, knowing that deportation was a problem, knowingly violating U.S. customs law, and admittedly, when talking to the news outlet, saying that they never thought that they would be picked up in Michigan. Now, a police report obtained by the Freedom of Information Act makes no mention of the deputy calling U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, only saying that he issued tickets for speeding and driving without a license. Oh, yeah, by the way, here we go. Magdalena Benitez, who didn't have a driver's license, gave the deputy her Mexican ID. That should tell you how certain they were that they were not going to get prosecuted, that she handed a law enforcement officer an ID from Mexico. And that should tell you how lax the border enforcement has been, for the past several decades. U.S. Border Patrol confirmed that they were contacted by sheriff's deputies to identify a man, quote, who failed to produce a valid driver's license after being stopped for speeding. Agents then checked their immigration records. The 2 illegal aliens were taken into custody by agents and face removal proceedings because they've been here violating our law for 20 years. Here's my one response to this. Good. You don't get to violate American law and then stay here. And it doesn't matter how many heartstrings you pull on, you still violated Wyoming law. As the Democrats are fond of saying, no one is above the law. The law must apply equally to everybody. And if it doesn't, it is no law at all. My friends, this immigration thing is a boondoggle. And thank God we have President Trump who's taking it on. But when you have couples that live here for over 20 years, who raise their children here, and yet make no effort whatsoever to become American citizens, they absolutely deserve to be deported. Now, it's not their children's fault. Their children are U.S. citizens because they were born here. It's the parents' fault. And what type of example are they setting for their children? Being here illegally for over 20 years, knowing all the time that they were violating American law. But let's see here. What else does this thing say? Miriam Ackerman, an attorney for the Michigan ACLU, questions why local police called immigration officials when they could have just given Magdalena Benitez a ticket for driving without a license. Only 19 states allow undocumented immigrants to get driver's licenses. That, too, is a major problem. Thank God the state of Wyoming outlawed that. If you're an illegal immigrant, you cannot get a driver's license here, nor does Wyoming, allow you to vote or anything else like that. Michigan, unlike a few other states, does not require law enforcement to report undocumented immigrants. Local police can choose to partner with ICE through an agreement called the 287G program. Under the Trump administration, there's been a surge in local police agencies joining that program. My friends, these people deserved to be arrested. And I don't really care what their sob story is. I feel bad for their children because they have dirtbag parents that came here and that broke American law for 20 years when they had every opportunity, 20 years worth of opportunity to become American citizens, to do things the right way, not to overstay a tourist visa. The guy knew that he was violating the law, and he should be thrown in the slammer. And deported, by the way. But there's more stories. These two people seem like, that they, aside from breaking American immigration law, they seem like they're, fairly okay people. They're criminals, but, they're not out there raping and pillaging and murdering people like this next guy. From the Post-Millennial, anti-ICE activists help illegal immigrant child rapist evade Colorado arrest. So, and that's another facet of this whole illegal alien debacle we have, is that there are a huge number of people who have been convicted of violent crimes that the Biden administration just let wander around. Let them continue to violate Wyoming law, to continue to rape and kill people. How many stories did we see during the Biden administration where suspect was arrested after 9 times of being deported? If you've come back here 9 times, just throw you in the slammer. You obviously haven't learned your lesson from being deported. So let's just build, maybe we turn Alcatraz, take Trump's idea, turn it into a big immigration prison, put up shark fences and keep the waters all jam-packed full of sharks so you can't get out. But it's amazing that so many people side with their hearts and say, oh, they're good people. They're good people. They're just family. He's just a Maryland man. He's just a Maryland dad. And how dare you try to deport him? No, they violated American law. If any of these people were conservatives, not that many of them are, they'd be thrown in the slammer faster than a January 6th protester. But it's amazing how many people say, well, look at the children. Look at their children. Oh, those poor kids. Well, maybe their parents shouldn't have been dirtbag illegal aliens in the first place. Let's round them up, get them out of here, and let's get back to law and order, my friends. It's just absolutely incredible. When we come back, we're going to talk about this illegal immigrant rapist in Colorado. They were letting criminals walk around free, or at least when the Biden administration was. Absolutely unconscionable. And you expect the rest of the country to follow the law. Why can't these people? Well, because they're criminals. And that's what criminals do. More in a minute. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Cowboy State Politics Live. I'm David Iverson. Welcome back to the program. Cowboy State Politics is in the top 40 of the conservative podcasts you need to listen to in 2025. If you want more information about the show, go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find just about everything about the show that you want to know. Also, if you want to send me a note, I've set up an email address for the program. It is theshow@cowboystatepolitics.com. If you want to comment on something we've talked about, or if you've got a story that you think we need to comment, or if you just want to send me a note, go ahead and do that. The email address is theshow@cowboystatepolitics.com. Also, we've got about a half hour left in the program. If you want to be part of the show and you got something on your mind, give me a call, 307-374-8989. Coming up on the podcast tomorrow, a return to what I consider to be a really, really, really funny story. Everybody remember Reed Reisner running, who thought he was running against Senator John Barrasso, the guy who didn't win a single county, and now thinks that he's going to buy TikTok for $47 billion. I don't even know where. I mean, if you've got that kind of money, why couldn't you have done a much better senatorial campaign? But anyway, so he's sending out cease and desist letters. And here's the funny part. He's accusing someone of violating a copyright of something that he's violating a copyright on that he stole from somebody else. And I've got the evidence to show you. I did a podcast about this a really long time ago. This is a story that, came up during the campaign, and evidently now he thinks that he owns somebody else's property. So tomorrow on the podcast, I'm going to tell you all about that. You don't want to miss it. It'll be kind of a rewind a little bit from the original show. As I recall, and it's been a while since I've listened to it again, but it was kind of a good time. And we're going to make some fun of Mr. Reed Reisner because you can't claim to own something that you stole from somebody else. And so we're going to talk about that. And maybe, just maybe, we'll get old Reed buddy to send me a cease and desist letter. I'd love to see it. Oh, and yeah, I'm going to talk to the attorney that wrote that stupid letter. But anyway, that's tomorrow on the show. You definitely don't want to miss it. So, illegal immigration. And, one of the things that I really get a kick out of every morning when I'm doing show prep is going to the sound bites that were played a long time ago. And it just so happens I forgot that I played this last week. But here's what our El Rushbo, the Maharishi, had to say about illegal immigration.
These illegals are being exploited and used by the Democrat Party, in some cases their own governments, by sending them here. And the American left in general, which has a big chip on its shoulder about this country anyway and would love nothing more than for all of it to be torn down. The problem with socialism is socialism. The problem with capitalism is capitalists. Now, before you think this is a criticism of capitalism, it's not. The problem with socialism is itself. There's nothing wrong with capitalism, except there are some people who game the system. But in socialism, why has socialism never worked? Because the people who run it are not socialists. They are full-fledged capitalists. Go to the Soviet Union, go to China, go to Cuba. The sons and daughters of party members do what? They live in the nicest houses. They have the nicest cars. They go to the nicest schools. The people in power in socialist societies have the power to game the system for themselves. In capitalism, you do it through your work. You do it through your education. You do it by accessing opportunity in the private sector. Socialism has the same kind of people who don't want to be equal with everybody else. Where, socialism exists on this premise that we're all the same and that we're all equal. And we're going to take from those who have and redistribute to those who don't so that everybody's going to have the same. But it never works out. And why not? Because there's always a ruling class that has everything they want, forcing mediocrity, averageness on everybody else. And those people left are still trying to game the system to get out of their squalid circumstances.
Make no mistake, my friends, most of this illegal immigration problem really has its roots in the Democrat Party's belief in socialism, that these poor, disadvantaged people in other countries, they deserve to have the same things and the same lifestyle that you do. And so we're going to allow them to all come in the country. We're going to take what's yours and we're going to give it to them. And we'll do it through taxation and through all of these ridiculous programs. Green energy is their latest lie. But all of it is rooted in Marxism and socialism, that these poor folks from other countries have to come here because they are entitled to what we as Americans have. And the truth is, it's not our fault that you were born into poverty in Mexico. We live in a world now where it is possible for you to get yourself out of poverty. Everybody has the freedom of opportunity. I don't really care where you were born. Granted, it might be a little bit harder if you were born in a barrio in Mexico. But the truth is, that doesn't entitle you to come to our country and to take what's not yours. Through theft, to abuse our laws, to abuse our system. But that is the fundamental belief of the Democrat Party. It's also one of the reasons why conservatives have a really hard time understanding the arguments coming from the American left, because we just don't look at the world that way. We don't believe that just because you were born somewhere else that you're entitled to what other people have. That's not how we function as a country. But the left, they fundamentally believe that, and it's why all of these things go back to socialism and Marxism. Let me give you an example here. So anti-ICE activists, which, by the way, the anti-ICE activists really aren't demonstrating against ICE. Really, it's their attempt at Marxism. You see, Marxism encompasses a whole bunch of these different groups. I think it was on Thursday's show, I told you about all of these different groups who are in alliance. And it's everything from, LGBTQ to these anti-ICE to, the pro-immigrant people. I mean, it's all Marxism when you boil it all down. But it has disastrous results in that we have a number of really, really dangerous people that are wandering around our country. From the Post-Millennial, quote, an illegal immigrant who is wanted for child rape in Italy was able to escape arrest after anti-ICE activists alerted him to the whereabouts of immigration enforcement agents. The ICE in Denver posted on X, quote, this morning, ICE and the Denver FBI were attempting to arrest Jose Reyes Leon Deras, a criminal alien from El Salvador. Another one, huh? Interesting. Who is convicted of and wanted for child rape in Italy. During our surveillance of Leon, members of the Colorado Rapid Response arrived on scene and alerted him to law enforcement presence, which allowed him to escape arrest. Groups, quote, groups like this interfere with ICE's ability to keep communities safe. If you know anything about them, call our number. Democrat Mayor Mike Johnston has previously said that police in the city would prevent the arrest of illegal immigrants by ICE and prevent deportations. But later, he walked back his comments, realizing that he was defending a child rapist. There have been a number of anti-ICE riots and protests across the country in recent weeks in response. Earlier this month, several cars were set on fire in Los Angeles after there were reports of ICE raids being conducted in the city. Since then, the Trump administration has vowed to ramp up deportations and immigration raids in the largest cities around the country. Again, good. They don't deserve to be here. They're violating our laws. And if the very first thing you're going to do when you come into our country is break the law, then you absolutely deserve to be deported to the southernmost tip of South America or other places. In a post on Truth Social this week, Trump wrote that ICE has displayed incredible strength, determination, and courage in recent operations, and that more deportations will be taking place across the country. Quote, in order to achieve this, we must expand our efforts to detain and deport illegal aliens in America's largest cities, such as LA, Chicago, New York, where millions upon millions of illegal aliens reside. These and other such cities are the core of the Democrat Power Center, where they use illegal aliens to expand their voter base, cheat in elections, grow the welfare state, robbing good-paying jobs and benefits from hard-working American citizens. And, it's a common lie from Democrats on the left that, these illegal aliens, they do, and of course they don't call them illegal aliens. They call them, these undocumented workers. They do the jobs that Americans just won't do. Well, I told you about that meat packing plant. I think it was Kansas or Oklahoma. But ICE came in and arrested 70 some odd people. And then within a week, that meat packing plant was deluged with job applications from people who actually live there. So don't tell me that, these undocumented workers are the only ones that'll do this. That is a load of bull crap, and it's a lie that's being spread by the Democrat Party. That's all these people do is they continue to manipulate the truth and twist it to fit their own narrative. And let me give you another. This one has blown up big, and as I mentioned at the top of the program, this is one of those episodes that I did that really got a lot of response. But the truth is, I think that most people just looked at the headline on the episode and they didn't listen to it, and see that my argument was, hey, you know what? You're being lied to, and if you're going to argue for something, maybe you should do it with the correct information. I'm talking about all of these the land sales or the proposed land sale from Mike Lee. Now, there's an interesting piece on The Blaze this morning, and I guess it was there a couple days ago, but it's entitled, "No, Mike Lee isn't paving over Yellowstone for condos." This is the narrative that's being spread by the left, that we're going to sell off all the public land and places like right next to Old Faithful Geyser. That's going to be affordable housing. We're just going to sell that off. Well, a couple of things here. First, there are a number of restrictions in the bill that the Democrats, both in Wyoming and nationally, won't tell you about, because their narrative is working to gin up opposition to Mike Lee's bill. And it all started with this map that was put out by the Wilderness Society and the Outdoor Alliance. The Outdoor Alliance is another one of these leftist advocacy organizations that doesn't have anything to do with conservation. One of the people on the board is Luther Probst, the husband of Democrat Representative Liz Storer, the person that I refer to as Wyoming's version of George Soros. He's on the board. Okay, so a lot of this misinformation is coming from people that are right here in the Cowboy state. But here's what Beck says in his piece, quote, "The left's idea of stewardship involves bulldozing bison and barring access. Lee's vision puts conservation back in the hands of the people. The media wants you to believe that Senator Mike Lee is trying to bulldoze Yellowstone and turn national parks into strip malls, that he's calling for a reckless fire sale of America's national beauty to line developers' pockets. The narrative is dishonest. It's fear-mongering, and by the way, it's wrong. Here's what's really happening. Private stewardship works. It's local, it's accountable, and it's incentivized. The federal government currently owns 640 million acres of land, nearly 28% of all the land in the United States. To put that into perspective, that's more territory than France, Germany, Poland, and the UK combined. Most of this land is west of the Mississippi, and that's not a coincidence. In the American West, federal ownership isn't just a bureaucratic technicality, it's a stranglehold. States are suffocated, locals are treated like tenants, opportunities are choked off. Meanwhile, people living east of the Mississippi in places like Kentucky, Georgia, or Pennsylvania might not even realize how little their land their own states truly control. But the same policies that are plaguing the West could come for them next. Lee isn't proposing to auction off Yellowstone or pave over Yosemite. He's talking about 3 million acres. That's less than 0.5% of all of the federal real estate. And this land isn't your family's favorite hiking trail. It's remote, hard to access, and often mismanaged. And the truth is, and this is, after that episode, man, one thing that infuriates me more than anything is when I know for a fact that you are being lied to. That's why I prove what I say, and I provide the evidence. And if you go to cowboystatepolitics.com on the show content page, there's a screenshot of the map that was produced by the Wilderness Society and the Outdoor Alliance. And I believe it was Saturday's episode. It was all about who made that map and how I can prove that it's all completely arbitrary, that they didn't even get, and even if they did get original files from the Bureau of Land Management, there's no proof that they did. There's no way to prove that the information that they're giving you is accurate, which, by the way, it isn't. Here's why. The federal government owns 6.4 million acres, or 64 million acres, excuse me. 1/2 of 1% of that is 3.2 million acres, or that works out to about 5,000 square miles. In other words, if you put it all together, all of the parcels that they're talking about selling, if you jam-packed it all into one spot, it would be an area of 70 miles by 70 miles, or 5,000 square miles. Now, I did my own little analysis, because one of the things I used to do in a former life was I was a GIS specialist, and I kind of like maps. So I wanted a visual representation of this whole land sale. And so, and it's hard to see on this map, but there is a scale on it. I printed it off the scale so that I could, get an accurate accounting of what this would look like. Now, this map I'm going to show you, this is not where this proposed land sale is at. I just picked a random spot on the map to show you how much land they're actually talking about. And if you look up at the screen, that's what it looks like. That's what it looks like right there. You see that square? That's all that it is if you jam-packed it all in there. But the truth is that all the land is not in Wyoming. It's in a whole bunch of 11 other states. And so nothing that the Outdoor Alliance is telling you is actually accurate. Now, I don't really care whether you're for this proposal or you're against this proposal. What I want you to do is proceed forward with facts, facts that you can verify. So to that end, let's go ahead and take a look at the actual proposal that's in Senator Mike Lee's bill, so that you can actually read it for yourself and you know what the heck you're talking about, instead of just going off of what other people say. And that's what a lot of people do. They just read something on the internet and they assume that that's the truth, and rarely is it. So let me just throw this up here and we can take a look at it. So here's the restrictions on the land sale. So it has to be nominated by states or units of local government. Okay, so all of these parcels, and they're all restricted to where they're already around population centers. So in other words, Cloud Peak in the Bighorn Mountains is not going to be on the list, nor is Meadowlark Ski Lodge. No, and that's specifically carved out in this bill. Neither is the area where my cabin is, or your favorite fishing hole, or your favorite hunting spot. None of that is included. Here's what it says. Quote, there's several restrictions. Quote, A, that are nominated by states or units of local government. That means Wyoming, or the town of Casper says, hey, we need this parcel over here. That they are adjacent to existing developed areas. And so whatever parcel they're talking about has to be directly adjacent to an area that has already been developed. Again, that is not your favorite hunting spot or your favorite fishing hole. That's right next to town. That it has to have access to existing infrastructure. So you got to have water and sewer and roads there. That is not your favorite hunting spot or your favorite fishing hole. That it has to be suitable for residential housing. And I'm not in favor of the federal government getting into the real estate business. I think that's wrong. I don't agree with any of these efforts for affordable housing. That's up to you, right? That's not the government's job. But again, what I want you to do is proceed with facts on this, not from what somebody else says. And the last one, or the last two, is reduce the checkerboard land patterns. This is a big problem in Wyoming. If you go east of Sheridan or Buffalo or even Casper, there is a checkerboard of public and private and state land. And in some cases, there's chunks of federal land that's right out in the middle of somebody's pasture that they can't use, that they can't access, that they can't do anything with because it's owned by the BLM. There's a checkerboard pattern that creates this whole problem of corner crossing. I mean, that's tied up in here. So one of these is that it has to reduce checkerboard land patterns. And the last one is that these are isolated tracts that are inefficient to manage. The federal government is really bad at managing land. In fact, in most cases, they don't even do that. There's really no management whatsoever. It's like they absolutely are the worst neighbor in the world. So all of those restrictions have to exist for this land to be sold. And again, none of it is your favorite fishing hole or your favorite hunting spot or Cloud Peak or a ski lodge or anywhere else. Everything you're hearing about that is absolute bullcrap. And there has been a lot of it. And let me give you an example from Democrat Carly Provenza. Oh, man, this one. And actually, Carly, if you want to come on the program and talk about this, I would absolutely love to have you on the show. And we can debate this whole thing. But, we're going to debate facts. We're not going to debate your perception of what might happen. And that's the main argument. I'm probably going to have our old pal Rod Miller on the program to debate this with me. But their whole argument is, well, it won't stop there. That eventually we're going to be selling off Cloud Peak and the Bighorn and the Cloud Peak Wilderness, and we're going to be selling off all fishing holes to the highest bidder, and it won't stop there, and eventually it will be everything. First of all, that's a logical fallacy. It's called a slippery slope. Just because something is true in one situation doesn't mean that it's true in all the others. And there are significant restrictions in the bill, and so I don't see how it's possible that it can continue. Unless, of course, they pass another piece of legislation. But the one that we're talking about, Mike Lee's proposal right here, there's no way possible that it can lead to that. But here is what Carly Provenza says from the Cow Pie. And I quote, as the conversation around a proposed congressional plan to sell off between 2 and 3 million acres of public lands in the next 5 years intensifies, detractors of the plan recall a 2024 court case challenging federal public land holdings and how numerous Wyoming leaders supported it. Last year, the state of Utah petitioned the U.S. Supreme Court to consider whether the federal government's holdings of 65% of Utah, and by the way, around 47% of the state of Wyoming, erodes its sovereignty and violates the Constitution. The High Court in January quietly rejected the request to hear the case, but not until after 26 Republican state legislators, Wyoming Governor Mark Gordon and Representative Harriet Hageman, had filed documents in support of it. Fast forward to now, and a spectrum of groups from hunters and environmentalists are railing against a plan by U.S. Mike Lee to mandate the sale. It's not a mandate. You don't have to buy it. A mandate says we will sell, you shall sell, and keep in mind, it's all one of those conditions in the bill says it has to be nominated by the state or municipalities. So there's no mandate there, Carly. Sale between 0.5 and 0.75% of the Bureau of Land Management and National Forest System parcels in the next 5 years. That plan has numerous carve-outs to include national parks and other high-value areas to exclude national parks. The sold lands are to be frozen for a decade after their sale to fulfill housing needs and associated community needs proposed in the bill. So she's already misleading you in the very beginning. It is not all tracts. There are specific requirements that have to be made in the bill. And Carly, again, I want you to come on the program and talk to me about this, but it is not all tracts. The map that was produced by the Outdoor Alliance and the Wilderness Society isn't even close to the truth. In fact, Representative Hageman told me that map was originally produced about the Rock Springs RMP. So it doesn't even have anything to do with this, and you can't prove that it's actually accurate. So there's a whole bunch of problems with the argument coming from the left. Now, again, I don't care which side of this that you're on. I want you to operate on facts. I want you to stop ginning up people based on things that just frankly aren't true. Carly Provenza, let's see here. The article continues. Provenza wrote a column on Monday in the Cow Pie in which she called for the governor, Hageman, and legislators to literally Lee's partners in the public land grab. It's interesting that she calls it a public land grab because a land grab usually is the federal government taking your land. But anyway, But the game, said Provenza, would be the same as the one contemplated in the U.S. Senate now. Those shared lands would end up in private hands. Quote, we can clearly see that end game for transferring federal lands to states has always been and will always be to sell them off to the highest bidder, she wrote, adding that Wyoming doesn't have enough money to manage the lands in its borders, and the federal government now manages. That's not true at all, by the way. Quote, and that's even more obvious now that we see counties cutting services to the bone, hospitals closing their maternity wards, and the state defunding education. Carly Provenza is a master at exaggeration. If you listen to her speeches on the House floor, many of them are very, very effective, but she exaggerates just about everything. And her favorite go-to argument is the slippery slope, which, again, is a logical fallacy, and it's not possible with this piece of legislation. The Cowboy continues. The difference between his backing of Utah's case and his cautionary approach towards the Lee's plan is local control, Gordon indicated Monday. The governor emphasized how important public lands are to sportsmen and others in Wyoming, but contrasted that with the plight of, quote, places that are surrounded by federal lands and are now trying to grow. Communities need to be able to craft policies that make sense so that we can allow for some responsible growth in areas for communities that are landlocked. Here's a good, something that I don't think that Provenza, wants or it has even considered. And that is these lands transferred to the state. You can hunt on state land. You can fish on state land. You can camp on state land. There's no reason why you can't. And it serves Wyoming's to a greater degree that the state controls that land and not the federal government. If that's the case, we don't end up with things called the Rock Springs RMP, which would have closed off millions of acres and landlocked a lot of private land, or the Buffalo RMP that would have stopped all coal mining by 2040, which would have ended Wyoming's economy. Though, if lands within the borders of Wyoming are controlled by the federal government, they are completely outside of our control, and there's nothing that we can do to stop them aside from electing somebody like Donald Trump to stop those sorts of things. But the truth is, Provenza doesn't want state control over it because right now the federal government is in control, and of course, she's a Democrat, so of course she wants the government to be in control. But the point here, my friends, is that operate on facts. Don't operate on opinion. Much of the response that I got on the 2 episodes this weekend wasn't even based on fact. It didn't even come anywhere close to it. Most people didn't even listen to the episode. And so, if you're commenting on one of my episodes and you get a reply from me that says, give it a listen, it pretty much means that I know you didn't listen to it and you need to because you're not operating on facts. And both of those episodes were well documented. I went to great pains to lay it out for you and give you the reasons why the information that you're being told isn't even close to the truth. And, again, with the restrictions that are actually in Mike Lee's bill, none of the things that the Democrats are saying are going to happen are actually going to happen. And, again, I'll give it to them. The Democrats are good at ginning people up, and they've done a good job this time. The only problem is to do that, they've had to lie to a whole bunch of people. All right, well, that's pretty much burned up another busy broadcast program. Make sure you don't miss the program tomorrow, the podcast. It's going to be absolutely hilarious. It'll be a flashback to something that happened during the time where Reed Reisner thought he was running against John Barrasso. And I'm going to explain to you how you can't steal something from somebody else, claim you have a copyright, and then accuse somebody else of violating the copyright that you don't have because you stole the property in the first place. It's a fascinating story, and you've already heard it, but we're going to bring it back. So for now, my friends, make sure that you subscribe and follow the program. That way you know when there's a brand new show out. And also, do me a favor, leave me a review every time you listen to an episode of Cowboy State Politics. Leave me a 5-star review. It helps keep the program up in all those algorithm thingies. But for now, from the base of the Bighorns, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. I'll see you tomorrow.